Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello and welcome to An Unconventional Life. This is your host, Dr. Russell Strickland, the founder and CEO of Dissertation Done. And I'm here today with Dr. Michael Levittan, who is an accomplished and recognized expert in domestic violence, anger management, child abuse, trauma, PTSD, and suicide. He's a licensed psychotherapist, director of TEAM, which is a state certified batterers treatment program. He serves as an expert witness in court, teaches seminars and courses at UCLA Extension. It works with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the International Conference on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma, LA Superior Court, Interagency Council on Child Abuse and Neglect, and the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. Dr. Michael has done work in media, appearing on shows such as the Tyra Banks Show, ABC News, Starting Over, Bad Girls Club, Montel Williams, the Irvine Show, Politico.com, Hollywood 411, radio, online, and print publications. He's recently published chapters in the International Handbook on Interpersonal Violence, including the History of Infanticide, a chapter on violence in our society, and a chapter on domestic violence in Her Story, His Story. Obviously, Dr. Levittan has had an accomplished career, and I want to welcome him to the show today. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. And you say I've had an accomplished career, and it's still going strong. Thank you.
Very well, very well. Actually, that's something that I always like to emphasize that for folks, that whatever our point in our career that we're at, there's still time to go and things that you can do. We've recently had a student who was in their 70s graduate with her doctoral degree. Looking forward to that next chapter in her life. So absolutely, it's amazing the things that we can do and the new chapters that we can write in this book of life. I'll just let everyone know briefly that today's episode is being brought to you by Dissertation Done. And here at Dissertation Done, we help adult doctoral students through the dissertation process. So if you are struggling through the dissertation or about to embark upon your dissertation journey, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done, and we'll have a conversation and see if we might be in a position to help you to graduate a bit sooner. And if you have graduated, your first name is Doctor, and you'd like to be the recognized expert in your field, the best way to do that is to literally write the book on your area of expertise. And you can reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book for us to have a conversation about that. Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Levittan. Let me start off by asking you, it's sort of a crazy decision to pursue a doctoral degree. What prompted you to go this route?
Actually, I could best answer that by saying that my decision to go to graduate school was tentative at first. I'd been reading lots of psychology over the years, and my mind works that way, trying to understand. To me, psychology is many things, but it's one simplistic perspective on it is that it's an answer to the question, what's really going on?
Sure.
So there's a certain depth to it that feels very real. The conversations I have, the therapy I do with people, the lectures I provide, we're not talking about the weather. We're talking about real live issues that affect people in very significant ways. So my initial impetus was, I really am interested in this. Let me go to grad school. Once I went to grad school, I didn't have much of a decision to make to go for my PhD. I just assumed I was not going to stop at my master's from the beginning.
Okay.
So I didn't have any decision to wrestle over. I just knew I was going to go for, once I'm in there, I'm going to go for it.
Got it. So you decided to pursue your doctoral degree. Tell us a little bit about what the dissertation process was like for you, because that's where so many of our students find that school starts to get truly difficult for them?
And, I've had a couple of friends, classmates in grad school who were friends who they went through all the courses and never completed the dissertation,
Wow.
which means that they couldn't practice.
Yeah.
They couldn't get their PhD. For me, I'd like to say my dissertation was a labor of love.
Okay.
I did not treat it as really much as an assignment. I treated it as something. I gave a lot of thought to what I wanted to write on.
Okay.
And at the time I was presented with options of do I want to do a research dissertation or a theoretical dissertation? And the research research in terms of giving out surveys and numbers and giving it to students and collating and collecting data and all that didn't interest me as much. I was interested in theoretical. And I chose a topic, the repetition compulsion, how human beings, Freud originally conceived it, or human beings have a strong tendency to reenact their early traumas in subsequent adult relationships.
Okay.
And this is very central to our being. One, that our adult relationships can be somewhat loaded and compromised because we're we're reenacting stuff from childhood that was never fully resolved in our current relationships. And two, I think it curtails our freedom to live. If we're just reenacting things from the past on an unconscious level without awareness, where's the freedom in that? So I was very interested in the topic. That's what I did. Now that I look back on that process, I gave a lot of thought. I put in a lot of time to choosing my subject matter. I wanted something I was passionate about. And that passion carried me through. Now, like many of the people who are, going to check out your podcast here, Dr. Russell, I was working. I had just started my, I was still an intern at the time when I started. Then I got licensed and I was working. I was developing a private practice. I maybe had a part-time job at first. I had a relationship full-time. I was busy. So my dissertation, in a way, I was something I looked forward to. And what I did to spice it up for me, I went to I'm in Los Angeles. So I did most of my research at the UCLA Biomed Library, which is 9 stories and has, like documents from Freud from the 20s and 1930s and other noted psychoanalysts, etc. Plus, I went to various psychoanalytic societies and institutions. They all have libraries. And I'd interact with people and ask questions and vary where I was going. And I still remember the UCLA campus. When I'd go to that library, there was a botanical gardens at the front of the campus. I would walk through there either before I'd hit the library or after. I made it like I'd clear out a day and do nothing but my dissertation. And I'd look forward to that. So that's why I say a labor of love for me. It was no question that I was going to complete it. Now, I could say a little more about it. Is that okay, Dr. Russell here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so one of the things that I learned that's sort of prized when you're doing a dissertation is you're treated like, and you start to feel like you're a professional. Even before I started seeing patients, to me, it started in graduate school. Like this realization I'm going to be a professional, and then sort of like the deeper realization, I'm a professional now. Any paper I write in grad school, anything I do, any exam I take, I'm treating this professionally. I'm not going to F around with this. This is my life, it's my career, and it's meaningful. I'm helping other human beings. I'm taking this as seriously as I can. And it was a natural process for me. And one of the things in the dissertation I realized, because I have a committee that I'd send each chapter to, and they'd approve or disapprove or send me notes, etc. And you become friendly with those mentors. And once you're in grad school, the relationship between student and professor is, that's why I think grad school is easier than people think. One, you're specializing in what you really want to study. And
Right.
two, the further you get, the more you specialize.
Right.
Early on in grad school, there's required courses. Then you start specializing. Then you build up relationships with professors. And that relationship becomes, from student to professor, starts evening up, where you're becoming like two adults, two professionals, you're consulting. They're asking, because you're doing research in a dissertation in a specific area, you start to really know that area better than some of the professors you're working with.
Right.
And I realized that originality was key. So I came up with this idea halfway through, or 2/3 of the way through my work, that I'm not just going to investigate the field of psychology in terms of repetition compulsion. I want to go through history. And prior to the whole field of psychology was the field, before that came about with Freud and psychoanalysis, before that came about, there were philosophers, early philosophers who opined on human behavior and families and how to treat each other. Descartes had ideas. He was one of the early ones, Descartes, the mathematician, philosopher. One of his ideas is still central. He said that human beings have a search for certainty in their lives. He talked about certainty and what uncertainty brings anxiety. I'm just one example. So I started researching philosophy, going back to the pre-Socratics, all the way through everyone, Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Spinoza and David Hume, etc. And I found this fascinating. And the more I did this, the more I come find people to chat with on this. This added probably another year or two to my dissertation. But I was in no rush. One of the things I found out early in my graduate studies was it didn't seem to be much of a time limit. I think I took almost 6 years to complete my dissertation. And
Yeah,
some
they'll
people
give
say,
you about almost as long as you want. They'll start to hassle you around 7 to 10 year mark, depending on the program.
okay,
But
they saw that I had product I was producing, a chapter and another chapter, and I'd revise the first chapter and hand in the next chapter. I was in process, and for me it was a fascinating journey.
mhm.
And it culminated. Can I go to where it culminated? It culminated in, you hand in your final product after much revision and consultations,
Right.
and then the process for me was I'm in a room being grilled and tested on my dissertation by
Right.
4 or 5 professors,
Right.
and that whole thing took maybe 45 minutes of grilling me. But in the first, I don't know, maybe let's say 10 minutes into the process, I thought to myself, I had a thought something like this: gee, these guys are pretty smart. They're experts in their field, these professors. They're my mentors. But no one knows my specific topic in this room as well as I do.
Right.
This is going to be a breeze, and it was. Because when they asked questions, I could tell by the looks on their faces, I was bringing them some knowledge, information that they didn't quite know. Because when you're into it and you're doing your dissertation and you're passionate about it, you become a real expert. And that's what I realized. So I enjoyed that grilling after the first few minutes.
Well, that's one of the things I get students who are early in the process. They always bring up that one of the things they're concerned about is, I'm going to need help with this defense. I'm worried about it. It concerns me. And my advice is not to dismiss that, although I want to, but not to dismiss that concern, because they really feel that concern. But the fact of the matter is that when it's time for your defense, you are ready for your defense. This notion you mentioned earlier of the student-professor relationship becoming more and more even as you go through the dissertation process or the doctoral program, that's by design. I mean, you're meant to go through this transformative period where you become your mentors. When you leave the dissertation defense, you have the same degree that they do. And although they may have more experience, you're meant to be peers at that point.
Let me say a little more about it.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I suggested I want to do this philosophy chapter, and I had to convince 2 of my committee members to do that. But we had that mutual discussion. On the other hand, there were a couple of suggestions that they made. Most of their suggestions I certainly went with, but a couple of the suggestions, I said, no, I don't really want to go in that direction. And then we discuss it, and I tell them why not. And I was respected.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you start feeling you have more of a voice.
Right.
And in my case, look, before I open my mouth, I back it up with reasons why I didn't want to do such and such, or reasons why I did want to add such and such to my dissertation process. So I backed it up, and it would engender lively mutual discussions. One of my most what can I say, well-known, an internationally recognized psychoanalyst who I got to join my committee,
mm-hmm.
and was very, like, in the beginning, a little what can I say, a little snobby with me.
Okay.
Because I'm just starting out. I'm sure, people go through that, but he was brilliant. So I took that to learn from him. And then as I went on in my dissertation process, it just sort of happened gradually and organically is the word I'm looking for,
okay.
where it became more and more peers, where by the end of this well-known, internationally recognized analyst is inviting me into his study to just discuss it. So I would go in there and we just talk about topics for like half an hour, an hour. And in other words, it's not just you're doing something. I said earlier, you're doing an assignment. I lost that concept early on. For me, I'm learning. I'm not only am I learning, but you start to get the feel as a professional that you're joining something.
Mm-hmm.
You're advancing a field of knowledge. Every lecture I do, I start out by saying, I'm trying to advance this field of knowledge. Hopefully you'll hear this and you'll take it forward in your way. So you're joining the ranks of people who are advancing fields of knowledge to further human development and enhancement, et cetera, et cetera. It's a fascinating process if you look at it that way.
Absolutely. And this really highlights the fact that you can treat your dissertation in a variety of ways. We have folks who want to get through the process as quickly as they can so they can graduate because their contribution comes with helping other people in a non-academic way. And those are the students that we tend to work with the most. Then you're going to have students who want to go into research and who want to, as you put it, advance human knowledge, understanding, and development. And it can be a fascinating time of coming into your own and realizing that you can join those same ranks as the mentors that you've looked up to for so many years. So it really is an experience that you get to decide how you choose to what you choose to focus on, what you choose is important for you. Do you want to find a topic that you're absolutely passionate about, or and spend those extra years on your dissertation, or do you want to find a way to get to graduation as quickly as possible because you know that you can be out there in the world helping people who have real problems right now?
I do have a comment on it.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I was still practicing with my master's, so
right.
I did not depend on my PhD to practice. But I want to say, I don't advise rushing through this process at all. This is your shot, your opportunity to really contribute something. And if you want to, people who are, you mentioned the word defense before. I didn't even use that term. I forgot that it's a defense of my dissertation.
Right.
People are, I didn't worry about that for a second. I just focused on becoming an expert in my field. and the rest would take care of itself.
And it does.
That was my attitude. I did not think, oh, I'm going into a room, I have to defend it and what's going to happen. I just focused on the process, because to me, that's part of being a professional. You're not in high school or college or undergrad anymore. It's on you now. You're not writing a paper or a composition or something just to get through it. And those days are over. You're a professional now. You have to put out good product, whatever you do.
And certainly for folks who, when they do say that they're worried about this defense, that's the same advice that I give them, is that when you get to that point, you're going to be ready. They worry about it ahead of time because they're envisioning the person they are now going into that defense someday.
Excellent. Right. Right, Russell, that's correct. Right. That's a great point. You're going to grow.
Yep. Through
this process as a human being, your knowledge is going to grow as an expert. So your
confidence level as well, as you go through this, you're going to accomplish a lot through this dissertation process. And so it is a different person that goes into the defense than the person who is worrying about that defense.
Excellent point.
Ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah. So we go through the dissertation process. You're out, you've graduated. You mentioned you've been working in the field already, but then you end up specializing in some really interesting things. Tell me how did you sort of choose or gravitate towards those particular areas?
The first specialty I had was domestic violence. Okay. And I think you mentioned in our pre-talk a little bit that the journey of being a professional out in your career, there's unexpected twists and turns and opportunities, things you never planned on. I never planned on all those specialties you mentioned, domestic violence, child abuse, post-traumatic. I didn't plan on any of that. So now I'm going to answer your question. My first specialty was domestic violence.
Okay.
And it came about, I have two responses to that. The first response is I was an intern at a counseling center. And though my my supervisor is what it's called when you're an intern, my supervisor, a very bright man who helped me quite a bit, but he did not know domestic violence.
Okay.
He did not know that field. So what I did was, again, you're thinking like a professional, I have to get this knowledge. I remember my first two patients I had as an intern. Okay. The first two were two different women who never used the term abuse or violence, but in the first sessions, I realized these women did not feel safe, with one with her boyfriend, the other with her husband, another didn't feel safe to go home. I consulted with my supervisor. He didn't seem to really be on it in that, or look, some people don't want to deal with domestic violence. Whatever his reason was, I started seeking outside help. I didn't just rely on my designated supervisor.
Okay.
I started doing research, who is in the field of domestic violence. And I found out the whole field in terms of treatment was started by a lot of women who were way back in the 60s and 70s from the shelter movement, the women's shelter movement.
Okay.
And I started looking for some of those. I would travel to go to their seminars. I would chat with them after. I became sort of, they were mentors, and I still was sort of friendly with them. I'd go to conferences. I'd do my own research. So after a while, even though I was the newest intern at this counseling center, it was a large counseling center, when there'd be a call at the front desk, this seems like it could be a domestic violence or relationship issue with dispute, whatever. And it became, give it to Michael. Give it to Michael.
Yeah.
Like no one else wanted to deal with it after a while, because I made myself, I wasn't an expert then in the early years, but I was in process.
Right.
I was the one learning, because I realized I can't fool around with this. If a woman doesn't feel safe, and one woman had a child, didn't feel safe leaving her child with the husband, this is crucial work. Two things about domestic violence. One is crucial, that the children and women and men grow up in safe environments and flourish in their lives. And two, it's crucial. And the second thing is it's immediate. Some people need immediate intervention. That's what a lot of clinicians I worked with at the time, or interns, didn't realize the immediacy of the work. You have to intervene sometimes right then. You have to have a referral for a shelter. I had to come up with things I never thought I didn't learn in graduate school.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying, being part of being a professional.
And the interesting thing that I get from what you just said there was that having gone through the doctoral process, you were able to become an expert in this field of domestic violence rather quickly because of the tools that you had accumulated through the dissertation process. And those tools were not tools to help you with domestic violence. Those tools were tools to help you with expertise.
That is an excellent point, Russell. Excellent. Now let me give my second response.
Okay.
So I became this new intern who became like the go-to guy for domestic violence. I didn't ask for this, but I certainly didn't turn it away. And my second response is because I think when we look back on portions of our lives, we may see the deeper reasons why we entered that relationship, why we ended a relationship, why we took a job, why we turned down a job, why we went to graduate school, why we didn't. Sometimes we need a little distance, a little perspective to really get the deeper reason. So when I think domestic violence, I had to, a little time had to go by for me to process that. And then I realized, wait a second, this has meaning for me, domestic violence. I grew up with a father, and my mom died when I was very young. I grew up with a father and a stepmother, and they argued constantly. I remember being a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, running into the kitchen or their bedroom, wherever they are. I hated the yelling. There wasn't much physical violence. I saw it once or twice, but the yelling and the name calling, and I would run in there and as a 4 or 5-year-old little boy and try to stand between them and separate them.
Wow.
And they would say, get out of here, or they'd chase me back to my room or something. But I kept trying. So the punchline of this story is, I'd like to think I'm a little more successful now with this work than I was as a 4 or 5-year-old. I didn't get anywhere with my parents.
Yeah.
But now, this is the deeper reason, Russell, when I look back on my life, yeah, this has meaning for me to keep people peaceful and have harmonious relationships.
And I think that that's something that most of us, if we try, we can look back and see there's something often from our childhoods that help motivate some of the big decisions that we make in our lives. I know that I personally can see some of that for myself when I reflect. So I think that's an excellent point, and something that people, it's worth reflecting on from time to time. Why is it that you're drawn to doing something? Because if you can connect with what it is that's deeply motivating you to do it, you can get more out of it yourself. You can realize more fully.
And then domestic violence, of course, you're dealing with that a lot, and you start dealing with social services, and you start coming across child abuse. Right. So I had to learn in a deeper way, what is child abuse? How do I work with it? How do I work with, again, as a professional, you're going to work with a lot of other professionals, be they social workers or attorneys or law enforcement. I mean, this is what, and to me, this was very invigorating. I had to learn how to interact with police, let's say, sometimes on a call, or a social worker who's investigating a case of child abuse. They'd want me, my information and feedback, and I had to get theirs, and you're interacting with these people. And that led to like working with post-traumatic stress, because a lot of people are traumatized in various ways, and that led to not just work. And then I started lecturing and on these fields, and when you to lecture, you have to do a lot of research. You're the expert in the room.
Right.
It's a combination of research and experience in the field. So before I'd hang out a shingle, I'm an expert in domestic violence. I'm an expert in child abuse. In fact, one of the things you read in the intro is my newest quote specialty is suicide.
Yeah.
And before I can say to anyone I know about suicide, and I have a podcast, I wrote a chapter in an international book on it. I do a lot of work before I let people know that this is what I'm specializing in. This is what I'm an expert in. Before I hang out my shingles, so to speak, I've attended seminars. I've read the books. I've done research. And this to me is all part of being a professional.
Yeah.
And then a lot of this led to doing expert witness work. Why did I do expert witness work in the courts? That's probably the most difficult thing I do in my career, although it's become easier with experience. Because when you're an expert witness, you're working with your attorney. It could be a post-traumatic stress case. You have to prove that there was post-traumatic stress, or it could be a domestic violence case, child abuse, whatever it is. You're working with an attorney and a client. That's who hires you. One or the other is going to call you. And they're going to ask you questions. You're going to consult with the attorney. But I learned how to do that. I joined organizations, 2 different expert witness organizations, to learn from people who've been expert witness for 20, 30 years. And I was new. Mm-hmm. The difficult part of being an expert witness is you deal with opposing counsel.
Right.
So what they call is your attorney asks you questions on what they call direct examination. You're going to consult with the questions. The difficult part is, and then the opposing counsel, and that's called the cross examination. Their job, before they even get to the subject matter, they're going to try to rip you apart. And okay, you say you're qualified in such and such. Did you ever take a course in such and such? And I'd say, no. You have to answer the question. So how do you call yourself an expert? In other words, they're coming up with tricks to make you look bad on the stand.
Right.
So what I would do is, after the first couple of cases where I had a rough cross-examination, I'd go to the back of the courtroom. I wouldn't leave the courtroom, and I'd watch the other experts. I'm just saying, I love the challenge.
Right.
And after a while, nowadays, I welcome the cross-examination. I know the tricks. You know what I mean?
Right. That's what you have to do. Just do your homework. It's about becoming an expert, not in your field of expertise, but now in communicating your field of expertise.
Let me say one more thing to this. I meant to say this when you made a similar comment before, that here's a word that's really important, I think, in becoming a professional and expanding your professionalism into whether it's lecturing or being a clinician or an expert witness. The word is initiative. No one's going to say, Dr. Michael, could you do? No, you have to come up with your own ideas and pursue them.
Yeah.
If I wanted to find a mentor or someone who, from the women's shelter movement, I had to make a lot of phone calls. You have to take initiative to be a professional. No one's telling you. It's not like, that's why I really try to get away. I used the term earlier, that the dissertation I didn't see as an assignment.
Right.
I'm doing this and taking it in directions no one's telling me to do.
A lot of people, when they decide to become experts, one of the things they like to say is, I want to be my own boss. And you got to understand that's an additional job. Being your own boss is itself a job. So you got to be good at that one as well.
Well, yeah, I had a really great dad. I lost my mom early, but my dad said to me early in life, I don't know why, he said, well, I guess not know why, but he said, Mike, whatever you do in life, you're going to have a lot of jobs along the way, but eventually be your own boss.
Yeah.
You can handle it, but there comes a price with that.
Yep.
You have to take responsibility to make things happen. You have to make it happen.
Right. 100%. Well, and along those lines, one of the things that I know that you've done in the little time we have left, I'd like for you to tell folks a little bit about how you've become so pervasive in the media. You've had a lot of media exposure. How did you make that happen?
Being out in Los Angeles helps. Doing a lot of lecturing means I'm comfortable in front of people. And having specialized work like domestic violence, and actually, I didn't even mention it, but anger management, an offshoot of domestic violence, not the same thing. There's some overlap, but differences. You become known. And producers, once one producer finds you, then location has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
New York and Los Angeles. Can I tell one brief career story that's my favorite?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So one of the lines of pursuit, which we haven't mentioned, is I've done a lot of, well, I mean, we mentioned that I lecture, but I've done some teaching in graduate school also.
Right.
And how does this go? Oh, this goes all the way, this story, right? I have a bunch of stories. Okay, this is my favorite one, because this goes back to my PhD program. I got my master's at California School for Professional Science, what was it called? California Graduate Institute. And
Okay.
I liked the experience. I knew a lot of the professors. I thought, by the way, they have a lot of boutique schools for psychology, for
Right.
people who are adults and already have careers, a second career, a third career. You need life experience to do this work.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's the story. So I thought I would apply to a different graduate school just for variety. So I chose a school that was even more well known than mine, called CSPP, California School for Professional Psychology.
Right.
And I thought I'd apply there. Now, in my master's, I got all A's in every master's course, and I was a professional. I was working. I already started doing some lectures.
Mhm.
I was on the way, and I applied to this school without thinking much. And I got a response that I'm on a waiting list. Now, you can call this a bit of arrogance. I thought, waiting list? I got all A's.
Right.
I did an interview with them. I know what I was already a professional. I was not a 25-year-old or 30-year-old kid. I think I was in my 40s already.
Yeah.
Early 40s. What? Waiting. In other words, I took offense to that.
Right.
Whatever you want to call that, waiting list. Why am I on a waiting list? So that was like in maybe in May or June for the September semester. So in the meantime, I applied back to my original where I got my master's, but I wanted to go to this new school. So I thought, okay, waiting list, they'll let me in.
Right.
So, May, June, July goes by, I check in, I'm still on the waiting list. And I never got accepted to that school. Here's why it's my favorite story. That same semester, they would not have me as a teacher. I became an associate professor at a school that would not have me as a student. I was recommended, there was an opening, I was referred by apparently the admissions department for students and the professors, choosing professors department are two separate departments.
Different people. Yeah.
And I actually taught the course, one of the courses that I would have been in as a student. They wouldn't have me as a student, but I became an associate professor. That's my favorite story. Huh.
Well, maybe student admissions had it right. You were supposed to be a student there.
No, but I was associate professor.
Right.
You ever hear of a story like that?
It's a good one. It's a good one. Well, Dr. Levittan, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. This has been just such an interesting chat. If folks want to reach out and continue this conversation, what's the best way for them to find you?
Well, my website and my email, I'll give that.
Okay.
My website, I think you said you're going to put it on the screen, but it's my name, www.michaellevittan.com. Michael, MICHAEL, LEVITTAN.com. No
Perfect.
spaces, no dots, except for the .com. And my email, direct email, let me give that. It's MLL Psych. I'll spell it out. MLL PSYCH at earthlink.net, NET.
Awesome.
And Dr. Russell, this has been a pleasure.
Well, I appreciate you being here. I will let folks know if you missed any of that. Go to our blog at dissertationdone.com/blog. Find Dr. Levittan's episode there, and we will link all of the points of contact and everything so that you can get to it easy as you please. I'll also remind folks just briefly that today's episode has been brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you'd like some help with your dissertation, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. If you finish that part of your journey and you'd like some help, maybe becoming a published author, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book. And if we can help you in either of those ways, we'll be happy to have a chat. Again, Dr. Levittan, I so much appreciate you being here today. Had a wonderful time talking with you today.
It was fun.
And for everyone else, have a wonderful day and go out and live your unconventional life.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.